Good evening. I'm Ian. That's Aditi, Lovneesh, Mahaveer, and Kirti. And on the screen from Pretoria, we have Vukosi. This is AI, skilling, and innovation. Rudy and the incomparable Carnegie India team did not ask me what this panel should be called, and wisely so. If I were asked, I think I might have said something along the lines of, what the hell are we going to do? The intense public interest in AI, and Gen AI in particular, stems from some meta questions. Who's going to write books? Who's going to write novels? Who's going to write movies? Who's going to write legal briefs? Who's going to write code? More practically, in this room, of policymakers, industry leaders, and scholars, we have some questions to be answered and asked around what is to be done for one, mitigating job displacement and workforce disruption, and two, enabling a tech talent ecosystem so that we can seize the opportunities that will emerge or already are emerging from artificial intelligence. It's 6:40 at night on day 3, so thank you for being here. There's been a lot of context setting. On the first day, we heard about skilling in the context of re-globalization. Principal Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner, the United States, spoke about skilling in the context of the USA CHIPS and Sciences Act. A panel with Tina Cuellar, the president of the Carnegie Endowment, that focused on the future of AI, actually had a lot of interventions from Google, Microsoft, and Salesforce with regards to skilling. We also have a lot of projections to go with that context. McKinsey suggests that over the window between 2016 and 2030, up to 400 million jobs will be displaced, 15% of the global workforce. Slightly more optimistically, the World Economic Forum suggests that there will be an uptick of up 40%, so I guess that's a surge by 2027 of jobs around AI, 30 to 37% increase of jobs around big data, such as data scientists. So how are we going to meet these projections within that context? We've heard some of the frames already, public-private collaborations, targeted policy interventions, say in sectors like education and labor, global cooperation and competition, but always in the context of national programs and national interests. A couple of us had a chance to chat before, and in fact, two of our panelists mentioned a historical approach. And this moment is a little breathless, and we can take a pause. We've been through this before. Charlie Chaplin, balletic, without voice or agency in the movie Modern Times, is stuck in the cog of industry, expressing the anxiety in the early 20th century of what will happen to work, to being and purpose because of industrialization. Even before Gen AI, before the Transformer papers of 2017, before 2022 and ChatGPT-3, we saw countless future of work projects that were built around digitalization. So there are historical lessons to be learned, but there's also the case to be made that this moment is a bit different. So I wonder, trying to not be breathless, but to recognize that we need to understand the moment in a historical context, but also with some sort of nuance and texture. If we can start with a little bit of a discussion about what we see out in the world right now. And we have a great panel. We can actually do this with something of a regional approach. We will turn to the future for sure, what is to be done. But also, I think a brief discussion of what is happening would be worthwhile. And I think we could start with you, Aditi, and what you're seeing from your perspective at LinkedIn in terms of job patterns, demands, and the employment sector in general.
Thanks, Ian. Happy to share what we are looking at LinkedIn from a perspective of what's going to happen to the future of work in the age of AI. I'm going to start with that. How many of you are not on LinkedIn? This is not a shameless plugging of my company's product or services. And the reason I ask that is because LinkedIn is the largest professional platform in the world. And that gives us this unique insight, a real-time nuanced insight into what's happening in the labor market force. We have 1 billion members, of which 100 million are in India, 66 million companies, and 133,000 colleges. The interplay of these various data points, we call it the economic graph. And we looked into this economic graph to see what's happening with, particularly with AI and Gen AI. And I'm going to split my time between what we're seeing on the demand side, that is from an employer's perspective, from a job perspective, and what we're seeing on the supply side, and how we're seeing workers' sentiment and how the labor market force is responding to it. On the demand and skilling side, what we're seeing is that applications to jobs that mention AI are growing 17% faster than job posts that don't mention AI. This position, a head of AI position, companies that have now a head of AI position has tripled in 5 years. Since November 22, so almost a year, job posts that mention GPT has grown 21 times in 1 year. Companies are hiring AI talent across technical and non-technical roles. It seems obvious that jobs in data science, in software engineering are growing. But what we're also seeing is that companies are hiring AI talent for non-technical roles in the supply chain, in sustainability. In India, the industries where we're seeing a massive growth in demand for AI skills and AI talent after information technology are actually professional services, so auditing firms, consulting firms, etc., and financial services. The most in-demand skills for AI jobs, predictably, there's a mix of hard skills. So of course, there's ML, there's data structures, pattern recognition. But surprisingly, we're seeing that the most in-demand skills for AI jobs also include a suite of soft skills, such as communication, leadership, etc. What this is showing is that people are also beginning to focus on those skill sets which they think are not going to be replaceable by AI. The hard skills have a short shelf life right now, but soft skills is what is going to propel people's careers forwards. And people have begun to realize that. Companies have begun to realize that. In non-English speaking countries such as Brazil, France, Germany, one of the most in-demand skills in an AI job, in an AI setting, is English proficiency. So what I want to say here is that another point that I want to focus here is that these roles are all new. 10, 15 years back, these roles didn't exist, right? We also heard previously that there's going to be fierce competition. Employers are competing fiercely for AI talent. Nations are doing that. The way we've hired in the past, based on what your past title has been or what your past pedigree has been, is likely not going to work in the future, especially with AI. You cannot advertise a job that says, I'm looking for someone who has 15 years of work experience in AI and went to college and has a degree in AI. That pool is very small. So how do we go about ensuring that we can hire effectively? And the way to do that is to adopt a skills-first approach. What skills are you looking for? What tasks are you expecting your employees to perform? Break that down, and then try and see if you can match from a usually underrepresented group. People who didn't necessarily go to a particular college, have the pedigree or have that exact same job title. So that'll expand the talent pool that's available. And then everyone has to focus on skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. And it cannot be done in isolation. I know Lovneesh will speak more to it. It can't be that every company is doing its own thing. It's the whole talent ecosystem has to come together to do the reskilling, upskilling, and skilling. I want to quickly now turn over to the supply side and what we're seeing on, I'm going to keep it short, on what we're seeing on how employees are sort of responding to AI. We've seen that conversation on AI on the platform, on LinkedIn platform, has increased by 70%. And I want to provide some context here. We've seen other seminal tech moments. So for instance, when crypto peaked, conversation on crypto peaked in November 21, conversation on crypto increased by a mere 19%. When AR and VR peaked in October 21, conversation on AR, VR on the LinkedIn platform increased by a mere 5%. Now juxtapose that with AI. It's increased by 70%. So it's definitely a bigger and a more seminal moment for the labor market force. than any of the previous tech tech breakthroughs that we've experienced. AI skilled members have grown 9 times from 2016. So members who've added an AI skill on their profile, we've seen an increase of 9 times. Members who've added terms like prompt engineering, GPT, has grown 71% in just 1 month time, between Feb 23 and March 23 when we tracked this data. It's no surprise that jobs are changing. The same job that we did in 2015, the skills needed for doing that have changed. There's some LinkedIn data that shows that to do the same job between 2015 and today, the skills needed have changed by over 25%. And I hate doing crystal ball gazing, but some projections suggest that by 2030, the skill set required to do the same exact job will change by over 65%. Yeah, I mean, I've shared a lot of data points. I'm quickly going to turn to what we're seeing on the national, on sort of how nation states are doing. And what we're seeing is that India has one of the highest AI skill penetration level. It's 3.23, the global average. This is all LinkedIn data, of course, so it's bound by its limitations. The US is 2.23 of the global average, and Germany is 1.72. I just wanted to put that in from an India perspective, that there is already great AI skill penetration relative to the rest of the world, and it's definitely an opportunity that we should latch onto.
The comparable crypto data is wild. If you're trying to evaluate whether people really think this is going to affect their jobs via LinkedIn data, they are not comparable technology moments. It's really something. Lovneesh, with SAP, you work across Asia, with Japan and Southeast Asia. What do you see in terms of the sort of employment spectrum, skilling space in the wider region, moving beyond India?
Thank you, and thank you, Aditi, for setting the context. What I want to do is build on what she said in terms of what is changing when we talk about AI and skilling. We have done, ever since we started, we have been doing skilling. So what is so special about, I think from a business perspective, we now need workforce which has a realization that machines will be their co-workers. That's one big change from what we had been doing. That is, the movement is now from digital to digitally intelligent world. That's a big shift that we are seeing when we talk about the workforce mobilization. The second thing that we want a workforce now wherein there is a realization that digital optimization that we have so far focused on is no longer the digital transformation. My workforce now needs to focus on high value tasks, and part of what she said actually validated that, and the repetitive tasks will soon be taken over by machines. That is something that the realization. Now when we talk of skilling in the context of AI, we need to understand two things. One, AI for skilling and skilling for AI. So AI for skilling per se is a great tool when I can actually look at increasing the ROI of my skilling, increasing the effectiveness of my skilling programs through personalized offerings, through increased the standardization of content and adapting to your needs. So that's one area where the business is picking up those requirements as a use case of AI. When it comes to skilling for AI, I think there is also gradually a realization that is coming in that AI development skills and AI deployment skills, there is a difference. In AI development skills, my logical journey in the workforce would be I learn, relearn, skill, reskill. In AI deployment, which are more use case based skill expectations, that's where unlearning becomes a major requirement, and then learning and relearning. So that's the big difference. And the third thing that we see that is coming is the ecosystem of skilling is becoming more and more complex. So from the single stakeholder, from a siloed thing that we have been, now it's not doable, because at least not now in the case of deployment. So why are we talking about it? Take examples, and you asked about the region. Take examples. IDC says in Southeast Asia alone, 64% percent of the companies are getting impacted by the digital talent shortage. In India, the NASSCOM report says the demand supply gap is 51%. Look at the ASEAN Digital Integration Index. Digital skilling is the last of the six pillars that they have measured. It requires the highest priority. So, and then also one more point is the skilling is no longer now a vertical. It's a horizontal. Look at the World Economic Forum Future of Job report. 75% of businesses, irrespective of sector, irrespective of line size, are looking at deploying, big data, cloud, and artificial intelligence. So from that perspective, there is no, there is no need to rethink on why is this so important and what's hitting it. From a business perspective, the imperative is pretty clear. A skill shortage means a project delay. A skill shortage means a project quality impact. A project quality impact has a vicious backward impact again on the whole skilling ecosystem. So I need to bridge this gap sooner than later. Now, what is happening? Now, one very important thing from a business perspective is the emergence of new roles on a very dynamic basis. A digital twin engineer, an AI ML engineer, so these are the roles that are emerging, and I need to ensure that, a continuous supply of this is available. At the same time, the repetitive, the telemarketing, the insurance claim processing, software testing are under threat because of the continuous adoption of AI. So that's what is actually shifting in terms of the roles and job descriptions that we are doing. I think more important for all of us in this room is how do we take it forward? And there is a slight shift in the approach that we see. And if you look at the India, the expert group report on the AI that has come, and it's I think one of the most comprehensive reports. It covers everything: compute, regulatory, skilling, the data sets. I think it's one of the most comprehensive reports in Asia that has come out, and it covers on the skilling. One very important recommendation is from the traditional skilling approach of catching hold of the individual and making him or her learn. It's now a necessity that we need to have a collaborative community when it comes to AI skilling. That has to be added. Second, in the first wave of our skilling and technology exercise, we actually thought of exposing students, children, youth at the education level. In AI, I think that has become a necessity, and it will be even better, and this is also a task force recommendation that I'm citing, that we create a competitive educational landscape when it comes to education. The third thing that is a learning from the previous waves of skilling that we have done, all of us trained everybody. Now is the time when we are actually taking the leap on AI to standardize the curriculums and repositories so that we have things to gain. So I think there are ways forward that we can take this step forward, and there are enough experiences in terms of the multi-stakeholder engagement within our own region, that is Asia per se. We can actually leverage much of that in terms of replication, and we have exciting times ahead. Let's see how we go and how far we are able to drive that.
Thanks, Lovneesh. Did you use the word unlearning? We might return to that. I mean, I try to unlearn bad habits every day, but I don't often unlearn some of my work habits, which actually some of them are bad habits too. So I think some detail actually later at a GTS that brings together diplomats, geopolitical thinkers, but also technologists and industry. It's good to dig into some of these actual practices, but we can hopefully return to that. Vikosi, thank you for joining us. I flew 23 hours to be here from California, and I still think it's more difficult to join via Zoom. So we're grateful to you.
Yeah.
You research around language and data models, but you also are active in the African startup community. in AI. Could you speak to sort of the patterns you're seeing in terms of deployment, but also the staffing situations around them? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And yes, unfortunately, I couldn't be there in India. There's just a lot going on at this moment. Also, this week, actually, in South Africa, to do a lot of science and AI. Yeah, I'm at the university as a chair of data science and an associate professor. I'm a co-founder of an AI startup based in Johannesburg. But really, I think to this conversation, and thanks to Aditi and also Lakshmi just before, I wanted to think, get us to think about a very different way to build up skilling. So for us on the continent, and this is just given from experience of moving around and being able to work with lots of different people, has been this identification that a decade ago, we looked at what was around. A number of us had gotten kind of our PhDs. For Aditi, I've got, I think, almost close to 20 years AI experience, but I do know it's very rare. And we looked at what was going on, and we couldn't see in the public sector enough actually build up in skills required for what we saw coming in AI. And when I say we here, is that the number of researchers, developers, people looking at actually building the technologies, not just deploying them or getting them from somewhere else. We didn't see the same thing from the private sector on the continent. And this gave rise really to the creation of a number of grassroots AI organizations across the continent. And what this meant is that communities came together, looked at what was going on and said, how do we build up the skills that will be required for these moments that we've seen in the last few years, whether it's looking at what reinforcement learning changes were happening in 2016. Now you've got ChatGPT happening right now, but these are not new. So with the grassroots organization, we're really building up to that realization that you've got a population that by 2050 will be one in 4 of the world, right? It's going to be a very different environment. And we just need to make sure that Africans are not just receivers of these technologies, but are actually creating them. And there's been major changes because of the grassroots organizations. So there's an organization that's looking at East and West Africa called Data Science Africa. We started the deep learning Indaba in 2017, and now it's grown to an annual meeting on the continent that brings almost close to 1,000 researchers and developers who are working and teaching each other. The biggest thing we need in order to really make a dent on the technologies is very deep research roots for AI. So you can think about what you need for that type of ecosystem. You're going to require very good universities. You're going to require the young people, which Africa has, right? Another thing, 1 in 2 babies born in 2050 will be African. A third of the workforce will be African. So you need to almost raise an army, continental size, to be able to really look at this opportunity and say, we've got this demographic dividend that we really should get, and at the same time, we've got this technology and digital infrastructures that we should get to. So the Indaba Masakani, which works on African languages, on building these infrastructures for us to communicate, building the data that's required. Another thing is being able to get data, so building the skills to do that requires these multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary teams that are very participatory. They take into account communities and work within those kinds of areas. And that's been something that we really want to take to the world as part of the learnings here of saying, there's a different way you can also do these things, and making sure that also communities' voices come out as you think about these skills. Because in some cases, if I think about language, as you refer to, Ian, you need to get language experts. And these are, for some languages, in South Africa, for example, you have 1 or 2 remaining speakers. But now you want to bring in and say, we could do cultural preservation. You can do an unlocking of language as a digital resource, right? That can drive trade. We've got AfTA, the African Free Trade Continental Agreement that just came out. But how do you make it work if people really, on some ways, aren't breaking those shackles of our colonial legacies? And one of those things is enabling AI-driven language in some ways. So there's a lot there, and I think the grassroots have been very interesting, to the point where you see them also spinning off. So you see something like the Indaba. Now you've got in Latin America Kipu, which is a copy of the deep learning Indaba. For Southeast Asia, you've got the Southeast Asian Machine Learning Summer School that is also learning from what we're doing actually on the African continent. And we also want to learn, like, from India, we've looked at some of the digital programs to try and actually scale some of the AI R&D across India. And these are things we can all be looking at. But these are the ways that for us, we can scale skilling. It can be relevant. If you're in West Africa, you might be more concerned about really being entrepreneurial. How do you get startups going in the spaces? If you're in Southern Africa, you might be more like, R&D based. And then if you're in a lot of what's working that's in East Africa, there's things on AI for good, conservation, like animal, like, food security, those types of things. But the grassroots allows you to be much more bespoke depending on where you are on there. And that's something that I think is very interesting and I really want to push to, for people to understand.
It's an incredibly well taken point. I think the question of how to communicate and develop bespoke systems is one that we also hopefully will have time to return to. If we had this conversation a decade ago, and we were talking about tech ecosystems and talent, there would have been a sort of, how do you replicate the Silicon Valley system? And in some ways, how do you bring together a culture that's okay with failure? How do you start to think about like finance from a VC world? And now the conversation of the past 3 days has been very different, of course, because the technology is different, but we've been talking about guardrails, we've been talking about government registries for models, we've been talking about export controls on chips. It's been a very government-heavy conversation about how the tech ecosystem and how the global technology space and the geopolitics of it will work, and probably rightfully so, but I think it's a very telling shift. So I wonder, Kirti and Mahaveer, put this question to both of you, although you answered, I would expect in different ways. How do you think from, say, a public partnership model, but also diplomacy itself, how do we start to think about government's role in this staffing problem from very different perspectives? Government, it's a very big concept, but
So I think in terms of this whole skilling for AI, I think everyone is seized of this, and we're sitting in India right now. So India we want to be the powerhouse for the world. So we have been this technology superpower, we want to stay there. So everybody in India right now is only talking about not only skilling for India, but skilling for the world. And we've just finished with the G20, and I was representing India for the digital skilling track. And it was really interesting. I've never been mobbed. I was mobbed at the G20 by all the countries because we have the people and we have the education system which is churning out 2.5 million STEM graduates every year. No other country is churning out that many. I mean, there is one other country, but we won't mention that name right now. Yeah. But but I think we're giving them a run for their money. So the idea right now is the government is coming to industry and saying, how can you help us? Industry is saying, we have this whole education, this pool of talent coming out of our colleges. Are they employable or not? This has been our standard problem in India for the longest time, our low employability ratio. So with the national education policy, with the government seized of this problem, with industry saying that we need to staff people not just in India, but globally. We heard about, I think Aditi mentioned some stats on the AI talent readiness index in India, which is quite high. So I think all the ducks are in a row, I would say. Now it's for us to take advantage of all that is available. So at NASSCOM, I think we're sitting actually bang in the middle of this. We run a platform called Future Skills Prime, which has been funded by the Ministry of IT, and NASSCOM was tasked to run it because they said, look, you represent industry, you know what the country needs because you guys have the jobs. And because we run the platform, we realize that all these wonderful things that we're talking about of skilling people, none of it works unless the learner comes and decides that I want to learn. The challenge that we face is that learners simply don't want to learn. They live in this golden age right now where everyone thinks, oh, this is wonderful, it's India's century. We're going to have jobs, we're going to be golden kids. But they don't realize that they're going to be obsolete by the time they get out. So the key is going to be how to motivate learners to learn, and that's where industry comes in to say, why should you learn? What are the jobs out there? What's in it for you if you learn? You talked about skill-based hiring. Practically, that skill-based hiring is not happening. Companies are still recruiting in the old-fashioned ways. So till when they shift is when the learners will shift. On our platform, we have about 100 non-IT companies. Now, I belong to NASSCOM, so technology is our life. So naturally, AI skilling is our life, all these technology skilling. So that's going on. The companies are investing very heavily in upskilling their workers. But the non-IT world, if I say 40 million people are employed, it must be about 50 million now. There are 5 million in the IT industry, but there's 45 million elsewhere. And if every company is becoming a digital company and becoming a technology company and using AI, we heard the SAP CEO talk, we're hearing about Lovneesh talk, now they all need AI talent. But the adoption rate of the employees in those companies is abysmally low. It's really, I would say it is at the rate of 5%. We have, if for every 100 people who's enrolled onto the platform, only 5% is actually studying something. Now that's a problem. Because if we want everybody to get skilled, we need everybody to learn something. So I think the one big thing we need is for all companies to impress upon their learners, motivate their learners to pick up these programs. We talk about the skills pyramid for AI. It's the one technology where we can't limit the technology to just the techies. We can't limit the technology just to the people who actually write the programs. Everybody needs to be skilled in AI. Not only to use it, but also to protect themselves from it. We finished talking about ethics and all the concerns around AI. If you don't recognize what AI can do and how you get impacted by it, how are you going to live with AI? Because AI is going to be fundamental in each and everything that we do. So it's the one technology where you need what we call the few, many, and all pyramid. There's going to be 1.4 billion people that need to be skilled. We just finished working on a scheme which you might have all heard. The Indians here in the room must have heard about the Vishwakarma Yojana. It's the government program for artisan, craftspeople, people like plumbers, electricians who work on their own. We were asked to create a digital skilling module for them because they said everybody needs to know how to use this technology, how to leverage it to make their lives better. That's a challenge for a country like India, because these guys are going to use the tech, and then the developers are going to build the tech, and then the PhDs are going to innovate on the tech. So it's a massive project, which if we don't all come together with the policy framework that the government creates, with the academia coming in to partner with industry, for industry supporting this, making this whole thing relevant, it won't happen. And I'm happy to see a lot of our partners in the room. SAP is a partner, LinkedIn is a partner, Microsoft is a partner, Meta is a partner, Google is a partner. All these companies are on our platform, and we work together. We go into the ecosystem, and we drive projects where we start skilling right at the grassroots, partnering with skill development missions, partnering with governments, partnering with higher education boards in state governments. It's a massive project. But the good news is there's a lot of enthusiasm, and I'm chuffed about what's going on.
How could the rest of the room not be after that? No, Mahaveer, diplomacy and skilling don't normally go hand in hand, and you're a seasoned diplomat, so tell us how you're bringing those two together.
Let me first talk about what actually the government is doing in terms of, in fact, she has just mentioned what the government is doing in terms of skilling. In fact, government is very conscious of the fact that everybody needs to learn somewhere some skills in the artificial intelligence. And in that context, the government has started various programs. One is the Future context a program. It's called Youth for Unnati and Vikas with AI. It's called Yuv AI. And this program is targeted towards the school students, and it aims to create an AI-ready workforce, which would also become human-centric designers, in terms of creating the real AI solutions to solve economic and social impact issues which are very much prevalent in India. So that's one aspect of the government's program. At the higher level, the government has also started something called Vishwesvaraya PhD program, and it's again at a kind of, the higher learning institutions. And they are primarily aimed to give, support to the students who wants to learn skills in, technologies as AI or the robotics, or maybe design semiconductors or so on and so forth. So there are many programs which are being run by government, and you talked about the public-private partnerships. So that's also being very well considered in the government. In fact, recently India AI, which is the prime program, and Meta has entered into a collaboration aiming at advancing research and development in AI and emerging technology. So there are many programs which are being undertaken by government. Government is very conscious of the fact that this is something which everybody in the country has to learn. If you have to really make the benefits of the government, the programs available to everyone at the towards the last mile, or everyone in the country, you have to learn basic skills of AI, because all the programs would be driven at some point of time, enabled by AI or embedded with AI in some way or the other. So that's where the government is. In terms of diplomacy, yes, we are very conscious of the fact that we have to navigate through this reality internationally. Also, you talked about various conversations happening everywhere, how to, go about it. There are risks involved in it. There are opportunities involved in it, how to regulate it, what should be the governance model. So we are all considering it in different levels at different parts of the government. And of course, there is consciousness of this fact that the AI ultimately should be used for the benefit of the people, and if there is a user harm somewhere, then perhaps the government would have to chip in sometime. So that's what I would like to say at this point of time.
There's been some reference to historical moments when we were talking, both of us, Aditi and Kirti, before, to sort of looking back across history at moments of technological change. And you just said, everyone needs to be skilled in AI. And also said before that, not everyone knows it. It would strike me as a sort of unique historical moment where everyone needs to be skilled in something as quickly as they need to get skilled in it, whether it was reading or driving or other skills that you needed for work. People didn't necessarily globally need to acquire those in the time frame that we're probably looking at now. It's a really striking moment. So how do we go about convincing people who might not know that they need to be skilled in it? And you identified one way: the market will do its own work. And I think, Aditi, the figures that you shared speak to the fact that many people out there know they need to be skilled in this. I mean, the difference between the crypto searches and the AI-based ones. But what are the ways we go about encouraging people? And this is something that I think about with younger individuals that I know, that they have to figure out how to start to work with some of these models and the apps that are emerging from them. Please, yeah. Anyone can jump in there.
Simply mandate it. I mean, just tell them that you have to. Put it in schools, put it in colleges. It's very easy to just put you have all these, what do you call, core courses that you have to do in college. Just make it a core course. Everybody will at least know something. In schools, I think that's the best way to start. Actually, this work happened some years ago, just before COVID. NITI Aayog had created a program called the AI, it was along with the Atal Innovation Mission, which was on how to build AI inside with class 6 students. It was such a fun program. And I read the program and we created the program at NASSCOM, everybody would do it and play with it. The kids would do it and they would learn and they would play and they would just pick it up. So you can make this so much fun to do. So I would just say, just do that to start with. And in companies, just put it in the performance appraisals and say you just got to do it, because otherwise you're going to make us obsolete as a company.
Look, mics are a form of power, and it's been mandated from up here, so get skilled if you're not skilled already. Lovneesh, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think to add to what she said, I don't think mandating something has worked in the past, but now it may. I think the more important part is to establish what's in it for me, for the end user. Now, take an example: India's digital public infrastructure, India's payment ecosystem. We did not go and sensitize everybody and anybody. The very fact that this is establishing a need for me, it is satisfying my need, it is actually working for me. Look at the penetration that we have been able to achieve, right? So, and we are one country which has actually made 1.3 billion people give 10 fingerprints, retina, facial, and that too willingly and coming, because we were able to establish that what's in it for me. So there are two ways of establishing what's in it for me. I go preach, hey, this is for you, or second, build a critical mass, what she said, about 5% utility moment, it becomes 10%, and then in high population countries like where we are sitting, we don't look back. So I think that's where is the two approaches. One of them will definitely click.
Vukosi, any thoughts?
Yeah, thanks. I think one of the things for us to understand within these spaces is that providing the knowledge or the understanding that is common about what's AI, what's computation, what's computational thinking and digital, also allows the public to really participate in thinking about the governance, in thinking about the values that we want in these technologies, and also actually what must be taught, right? If for us, for example, if you're thinking big tech, sure, they are scraping the internet and they can work in whichever way. But if some of the skills that AI practitioners need, the skills that they need, for example, on the African continent, is understanding actually how to navigate copyright and IP. So that skill has to be there, because once you actually start working, you notice that you need to be able to navigate this area that other AI researchers or AI practitioners and developers might not in other countries or in other continents, because of just the way that the systems actually work. So when you get people to understand what AI is, it actually comes naturally that they start asking the questions, and then those questions lead to developing those curricula that actually make sense, right? For where they are and what they need on there. We might talk about ethics that has to do with dealing with data in sensitive applications. And again, when you know that what you're doing, I think there was a question about being able, a note about biometrics. Once people know what's being collected, how it's being collected, why it's being collected, they then start going like, but how do you store it? How do you make sure it's safe? And now you go in and say, how do we make sure we have the skills that people can then build the infrastructures that are safe, that make sure that they meet our requirements, they meet our governance requirements within there. And I'm an advocate that likely for things like universities, data 101 is, and computational thinking 101 will have to be there. Not necessarily about AI. You can know AI in terms of what's going on in general, but we also still need the core skills. You need the math, you need the statistics, you need the computer science, because when you hit the walls, when you really hit the walls, you need the core kind of depth in those fields to be able to really innovate forward on there. And in the same ways that you will need good ecosystems for entrepreneurship, people who also study how your entrepreneurship networks work in your country. And then AI just becomes another thing that they add, like, on top of actually then as an enabler. So yeah, I think that's it for me.
We have just 5 minutes left, and I'd like to, there are 5 panelists, so this is perfect. We tried to dig into some specifics, and I think some of the case the case uses, so to speak, to use AI language, have been really, really helpful. But let's just be playful as we go into the evening a little bit. We in California polled Californians and asked them whether they were excited or worried about AI. 48% of Californians chose worried, 38% optimistic. We actually thought that was a kind of a nice balance. We were expecting more to go towards worried. Those who were worried about jobs and violence, social instability. Those who were excited about improvements in health and science. In neither cases were they worried or excited about effects, say, for climate change action. But if we just go really quickly around the room, we'll start with you, Vikosi, because you're there and you were just on. If you had to vote, there's this pessimism, there's this worry. People are thinking, oh my gosh, there's this sort of catastrophic existential threat that's coming to both jobs and potentially like military situations. What are the reasons to be optimistic here? Are you? And do you think that we're going to be able to sort of meet the moment? We're allowed to be pessimistic too.
No, I'm very optimistic because in really for us to build up the systems that we want, the skills that we want, we need to resolve very quickly and almost all at once some of our very pressing challenges in lots of different areas. And this then means that you've got something that is pulling you, right, to say resolve those things because there's a big shift in the geopolitics of economies at the moment because of this enabling technology. So I'm very optimistic, and I do think that people will meet that challenge. I do believe in humanity, but we must make sure, make sure that everybody counts.
A vote for coevolution, but with everybody coming along together. Aditi?
Yeah.
If you look at the long arc of economic history, there have been such moments, technological moments, which have seemed like doomsday, Armageddon, whatever you want to call it. And what we've seen is that it's not been that bad. In fact, it's led to some opportunities. So from that perspective, I'm definitely positive. I'm going to latch on to what he mentioned at the end about taking everyone along. And I think one facet that I do want to call out from what we're seeing again on LinkedIn data is that when you look at the AI talent pool, it is 70% male, 30% female. And we're at this point in time where if we put some intentionality as employers, as policymakers, we can ensure that going forward, the AI workforce is more equitable and brings everyone along.
It's 3 days in and no one's fatigued. Optimism too. Lovneesh.
No, I don't think pessimism, you have a choice. There is no choice called pessimism because technology is going to now, you cannot stop it. It will happen. To me, pessimism is no choice. Caution, collaboration is the definite choice. Let's do that and move forward.
Caution and collaboration is a great bumper sticker for AI. Mahaveer.
Thank you. I think there are two sets of people. Some are bloomers and the others are doomers, as I think Nandan Nilekani pointed out in the very first day. So I'm on the bloomer side. We have enormous problems in the country. We have a lot of issues to be resolved, and we see AI as an enabling factor which can certainly help government and everyone, industry and the people at large, to come forward and resolve these problems in a way which can be equitable to everyone, which can be beneficial to everyone. And I think AI would be a great enabling factor in that. So I am on the bloomer side.
I have a feeling I know where you are, Kirti, but I still want to hear it because it's going to make us all feel more optimistic.
Actually, I'm worried. I'm worried because it's a huge opportunity, but to take advantage of that opportunity means we have to do a lot of work. And for a country like India, where our numbers are so large, where so much of our population is not educated, does not have access, does not understand this technology, the fear of exploitation can be a problem. So while I see it as a big opportunity, I have a crease on my brow on whether we can take advantage of it in the right way.
I think today morning I met somebody who mentioned a very interesting thing. It's something with mouth-watering opportunity and eye-watering challenges.
Well, with that, there is no better way to end. Please join me in thanking Aditi, Lovneesh, Mahaveer,